Okay. Good morning. Good morning, and thank you for being here. Before we get started, I'd like to thank a few people who made this audit possible. First, I'd like to thank the auditors in the Controller's Office who worked so hard, late nights and weekends, to expose the issues that are detailed in my office's sexual misconduct audit that we're here to talk about today. I also want to thank my staff that worked so hard on it, and I'd like to recognize the city employees who called our phone line, because it took a lot of bravery for them to do that, to talk about their experience with sexual harassment at the city, and the information that we gained from them was so helpful to understand that the problem of sexual harassment, it's much bigger at the city than what the numbers may show. The idea for this audit grew out of the Me Too movement, which is happening across the country, and also revelations of sexual harassment across the city government. First, there was the shocking sexual harassment that occurred at the Parking Authority in 2016. And then in 2017, the allegations of sexual misconduct came out against the sheriff. And then in late 2017, it became public that the city paid $1.25 million of taxpayer money to settle a case involving a police department commander who, to this day, is still on the job. These incidents made me wonder if the city was truly doing enough to protect its employees from sexual harassment and to protect taxpayers against the financial liability of the payouts. After taking office in January, I announced a performance audit of the city's sexual harassment policies, procedures, and payouts to determine if the city has clear and effective procedures for reporting sexual misconduct, if city officials are performing investigations into employee complaints appropriately, and if discipline is dispensed fairly and consistently. What we found was an inadequate and poorly implemented policy, a convoluted system for reporting complaints, ineffective procedures, non-uniform punishments, insufficient training, and an overall lack of clarity around how to address sexual misconduct. Specifically, I want to call attention to 6 of the findings. First, we found a decentralized system to receive, investigate, and resolve complaints, where the responsibility for handling the complaints was distributed among all departments across the city. And despite procedures requiring that the department head review the facts of an investigation to determine if complaints should be substantiated, 54% of departments indicated that they did not or would not include the department head in the process for reviewing the investigation. Second, we found there was no procedure in place for how to proceed if an allegation is made against an elected official, such as the case with the sheriff's office. In fact, the current policy states that copies of completed investigations must go to the department head and the cabinet official. As a result, we found that the completed, substantiated claim against the sheriff was delivered to the sheriff himself in 2018. Third, we found that discipline varied greatly between departments and positions, and discipline was not appropriate or proportionate with offenses. Several departments issued suspensions between 1 and 3 days for inappropriate conversations, while another department merely issued a written warning for an employee groping a coworker. Even more concerning, our auditors found instances in 5 departments, aviation, fire, police, sheriff, and streets, where lower-level employees received harsher punishments than supervisors for similar conduct. Our review of the investigative process by the Mayor's Office of Labor Relations EEO unit made it apparent that there are no specific recommendations for discipline if a claim is substantiated. In the situation with a substantiated claim, a letter is sent to the department head recommending training, and in more severe cases, stating that appropriate measures should be taken. However, it doesn't detail what this means. This vague recommendation exacerbates the arbitrary level of discipline that we've seen in the audit between and within departments. Fourth, we found that training is insufficient and not attended as it should be. Our testing showed that 59% of supervisors, managers, and executive staff had not received mandatory training in the last 5 years. Fifth, during the course of our audit, the law department's internal tracking system came into question. In requesting complaint and litigation information regarding sexual misconduct, the system produced inaccurate results. First, failing to identify cases that should have been included, and then not able to identify sexual harassment cases from the more widely used gender discrimination tag. For this reason, we believe that settlement and litigation costs could be greater than the $2.2 million identified in the audit. And lastly, we requested all sexual misconduct complaints from July 2012 through April 2018 from all 50 departments, as well as the complaint files from the Mayor's Office of Labor Relations EEO unit. And we received documentation for 121 complaints. However, we do not believe that that represents the full scope of sexual misconduct claims. Many of the callers to our phone line stated that they had filed a complaint. However, there was no matching case file that was sent to us by the law department and other departments. To better protect workers and reduce the city's liability for payouts, we recommend considerable changes to the city's approach in addressing and responding to sexual misconduct. Among the most important recommendations are, first, the city should centralize the process for sexual harassment claims to create consistency in investigation and discipline. Removing investigations from a department's purview make sure that the standards of investigations are consistent for all cases and mitigates the possibility of bias from the investigator. Second, the city should establish standardized guidelines for recommended discipline that is used by the centralized unit to ensure that sexual misconduct is dealt with fairly and consistently. Third, the sexual harassment prevention policy should be overhauled to give more explicit instructions on how to report a complaint and what to expect when making one. Fourth, the city should implement a new, comprehensive, high-quality sexual misconduct training program that better serves employees at all levels of government. And lastly, the law department should revise its current system for tracking cases and settlement costs to ensure complaints, lawsuits, and payouts are easier to track. I'm going to turn things over to Mayor Kenny in just a moment, but I'd like to say one last thing. My hope for this audit is by exposing the problems related to sexual misconduct at the city and giving recommendations that there can be a change in workplace culture here at the city. I want to work towards making sure that all employees here feel safe and supported, and that's going to require real change. I want to thank Rich Laser, Deputy Mayor of Labor, and Marcel Pratt, City Solicitor, for their cooperation and support throughout this process. And I'd like to thank the Mayor for accepting our audit findings and acknowledging that change needs to happen. In a moment, he'll provide you an overview of the updates to the policy and governing executive order and some other changes to policy and procedures. I believe that this is a good first step and I encourage the mayor and his team to implement the full recommendations outlined in the audit. And the truth is, I don't see this audit as something that's now checked off my to-do list. I'm going to follow up to ensure that real progress is made so that our employees are working in a safe and supported environment. I'd like to introduce Mayor Kenny now. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca, and good morning to everyone. One of the core pillars of this administration is to create a diverse workforce and to treat that workforce with respect. We strive to more deeply embed the principles of diversity and inclusion into our workplace and to ensure that all employees feel respected, safe, and welcome. Sexual harassment has no place in this vision. Since the beginning of this administration, we have taken this issue seriously. Starting in late 2016, we identified the need to improve our policies, procedures around sexual harassment training, and we began requiring all managers to be trained at more frequent intervals. It was clear even then, before the issue rose to its current national prominence, that more was needed to be done. So in 2017, we formed an internal working group to undertake a comprehensive review of our policies and practices around sexual harassment, training, reporting, and investigations. Today, we announced the results of that effort, including an updated executive order that I will sign shortly and a detailed policy governing the executive branch. These important documents reflect the finding of our working group, a response to the demands of the voters and to the recommendations of the Comptroller. We are grateful for the Comptroller's Office report on this issue, and we look forward to partnering with her and our staff going forward. Our work also rests on the foundation set earlier this year by City Councilwoman Blondell Reynolds Brown, who unfortunately could not be here today. This past May, voters approved her ballot referendum changing the city charter to mandate that all city officers and employees undergo sexual harassment training at least every 3 years. The executive order that I'm about to sign declares that all city employees have the right to work in a professional environment free from sexual harassment and discrimination. And more importantly, the order provides concrete, tangible steps towards accomplishing that goal. It says all managers and supervisors are expected to actively work to create and maintain diverse, inclusive workspaces free from sexual harassment, intimidation, or discrimination. Attached to the order is the city's new sexual harassment prevention policy. This policy does several important things. It reinforces the requirement that all employees and supervisors receive training as mandated by the new charter provision. It defines all types of conduct that are prohibited, and it overhauls how investigations are conducted. The working group identified a key problem regarding investigations. The city's organizational structure can create opportunities for inconsistent discipline in cases of sexual misconduct. So the new policy also provides a clear and consistent approach to investigations, including procedures for making complaints, for investigating them, and for resolving the complaints. The improvements include a website that enables employees to file sexual harassment complaints using their computer or mobile devices. And we have established a centralized citywide tracking system of sexual harassment complaints. All of this represents a major step forward in how the city handles this issue. But this is not the end point. The revised policy will not be allowed to stagnate because the Comptroller will not allow it to stagnate. The city has committed to reviewing the policy yearly. This includes studying the complaints and investigations to make sure that we're using the best methods to achieve the goal we've set for ourselves. We'll also gather feedback from city managers and employees to ensure that the policy both accurately describes current conditions and practices and is meeting the needs of the employees. We must be committed to continuous improvement to make sure our policies and practices live up to our commitment to inclusion in changing times. We know all these efforts are worth it, not just to address the most egregious forms of harassment that we can easily identify, but to eliminate other actions that make people feel uncomfortable in their own workplace. All of this will lead to our ultimate goal, to ensure that city personnel have a work environment that is inclusive and is safe, and that is free from sexual harassment, intimidation, or discrimination. I'd like to now turn the floor over to Monica Marchetti-Brock, the Director of Labor Relations, who can provide details on the new prevention policy. And we were very happy to work with the Comptroller and her staff in moving this very important issue forward together. So Monica, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor Kenny and Controller Reinhardt. As the Mayor mentioned, we have several key updates to the sexual harassment prevention policy. When we began reviewing this policy and creating a task force well over 7 months ago, we focused on what we wanted this policy to achieve overall. Most importantly, our main objectives were access, consistency, uniformity, accountability, and transparency. I will highlight some of the major changes in this policy. The statement of policy was expanded to include a commitment to foster a diverse, inclusive, and safe work environment and to cultivate a culture of respect. Dissemination and posting. It's important that every employee receives a copy of this policy and signs an acknowledgement form of its receipt. Appointing authorities and departments will be responsible for giving this information to employees and making sure that they are aware of the policy and aware of the procedures outlined within it. The policy will be posted at each work location. It will include contact information for the HR representatives in the department, as well as the ER unit, which is the Employee Relations Unit that's housed in the Mayor's Office of Labor Relations. We've also created an Employee Relations phone number where employees can call to talk with us at any given time. We're also updating our website so that they could easily access information and that they could, have forms and information that they need, as well as the policy. The statement of prohibition was amended to include third parties, such as contractors, vendors, grantees, and customers. It's important that we added this feature to the policy. New categories were added under prohibited conduct to include gender identity, sexual orientation, and the use of technology. Modifications were made to every category under prohibited conduct to include examples that each employee could identify as a problem within the workplace. Identifying unwelcome behaviors help employees to be better informed and better understand so that they can comply with the policy and make sure that they are part of an inclusive, safe environment and that environment can be achieved. We've enhanced the procedure for making complaints. Now, employees will be able to file a complaint electronically using any PC or smart device. This will offer an additional avenue for employees to address complaints. They'll be able to do it right from their phone. The procedures for investigating and resolving complaints has been revised as well to require that departments report and track complaints using a centralized case management system as the Mayor identified. This system will be housed under the Mayor's Office of Labor Relations, and the Employee Relations Unit will use this system to track the complaints from the moment they come in until the moment they reach resolution. The Employee Relations Unit will either assign the case to the appropriate departmental professional or the ERU for investigation. If it is referred to the department, the ERU will be responsible for the oversight of the investigation. The ERU will also provide support to the department in handling the investigation to ensure each investigation is conducted uniformly across the government and in a timely manner. The investigation must be completed within 90 days. The case management system will allow us to track it from the date it comes in until the moment it's resolved. Cooperation with the investigation. All employees under the Home Rule Charter are obligated to comply with an investigation. They have a duty as a city employee to cooperate with that investigation. Failure to do so may result in disciplinary action up to and including termination. Disciplinary recommendations. For substantiated complaints, the ERU will make recommendations to the department for disciplinary actions and next steps. In some cases, additional training may be needed for an individual or a department. It's very hard to standardize discipline across departments because there are different disciplinary matrices within each department, and they are unionized employees. The addition of responsibilities and duties section for managers and supervisors is probably one of the most important features in this policy. Each manager and supervisor, as well as executive leadership, have a duty and obligation to maintain a work environment that is free from harassment, and they are also responsible for the conduct of their employees. They have a duty to report any complaint of sexual misconduct to their HR manager for processing in accordance with this policy. As the mayor mentioned, the policy will be reviewed annually, and it will go through our office. We will be doing extensive research over the next year to really see what else needs to be added to this policy. Training. Training is very important. Without the tools our managers and supervisors need and our HR professionals, they're not able to do the investigations properly. We need to really revamp the training program to make sure that they have those tools that are required to get the job done. In accordance with the policy, all employees must receive the training. Each employee, not just managers and supervisors, will receive some form of training. And we're in the development process at the moment. They will receive this training every 3 years, and it will be tailored and developed to meet the needs of that particular employee group. The rights and responsibilities of an employee versus an HR manager or a supervisor or a department head are vastly different, and it's important that each category of employee understand what their rights and responsibilities are. The training will be tailored. It'll be tailored to raise awareness of the expectations of their rights and responsibilities under the policy. As you can see, our work is not yet done, but it's just beginning. Thank you.
I'm going to take the opportunity now to sign the executive order, and then we'll be back for questions. Any questions?
Mayor, what do you make of the controller's claim that lower-level workers were hammered on this and managers were not?
We're in agreement with her, and that's why we're standing here together to fix the problem.
Has anybody, Mayor, have you fired anybody in city service for
I-
sexually harassing anybody?
I don't personally fire anyone. I could find out whether or not there are records of firing. There?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are records of dismissals for sexual harassment, yes.
Can you share how many, in what period of time, perhaps since you took office?
Well, the audit scope was over 5.5 years, and the 2012 to 2018, and can't give it an exact number of the number of dismissals. I think to the point was that there were instances within departments where we saw lower-level employees get treated much more harshly than supervisory-level employees. And that's actually the opposite of the way it should be. So the way it should be is that supervisors are supposed to be held to a higher standard, which is one of the reasons that the recommendation is for full centralization, so that the investigators, the risk of an investigator knowing the alleged harasser or having bias in the investigation would be diminished.
Were there any managers fired or supervisors fired that you see in terms of the records?
I can't speak to that right now. I'm not, I think most of the time what we found is that there's many cases of suspensions. We have a list in the audit of the 63 substantiated cases, what was the outcome. So I'm sure I could direct you to the page afterwards, but there's verbal warning, written warning, training, suspension, or termination, and it actually goes through out of those 63 what was the result of that. So let's go to the next question, and then we can go back to that one.
Today's policy overhaul doesn't seem to address the first two recommendations in the controller's report. The first being which they want to centralize the process for investigating all sexual misconduct complaints. The second being to establish a standardized guideline for disciplines. That doesn't seem to have occurred with this new policy, so can the administration commit to either of those
Yes.
recommendations?
You can expand on it, but that is in the process now and will be completed and addressed. We accept the findings of the Controller's Office and will address each of those findings.
So the way that the city is structured currently, each appointing authority and department has jurisdiction under the Home Rule Charter for discipline. It's very difficult to standardize discipline across the government. That's what we're going to try to do under the new policy. There are different disciplinary policies and procedures within a department. Also, a majority of our workforce is unionized. When you're imposing discipline, discipline has to be for just cause, and there has to be a nexus, and there should be a nexus, and I agree with Rebecca that if someone does something that's terribly egregious, the disciplinary action should be serious. It should not be a written warning or a verbal warning, even if it's a first infraction. If it's egregious, it warrants a higher level of discipline. As far as handling all complaints centralized, my unit, the Employee Relations Unit, is going to monitor all of that. Currently, the unit is 3 people. We don't have the bandwidth to do every investigation for 30,000 employees, but we are happy to monitor that, and we are going to monitor that under the policy.
Question from the mayor very quickly. You stated that the new policy defines all types of conduct that are prohibited. A lot of this seems to be common sense, but for the people that are hearing this, who have been employed by the city for many years now, common sense, if you could just name a few, and put it into perspective as it relates to the Me Too movement that has gained national attention.
I think what's important as part of this whole effort is to make sure that employees feel comfortable and safe in reporting things that make them feel uncomfortable or things that have happened to them that have destroyed or impacted their work environment. That's an important part to allow people to come forward more. It takes a lot of courage to come forward and to make the allegation and put yourself out there, even to an investigator privately. And we want to try to make that opportunity, those instances, seamless and less offensive and uncomfortable for the person who's making the allegation or making the report. And I think that's important. It's an extremely important part of this. Not only the discipline. Look, if I own Philadelphia, I could fire anybody I wanted. That would be an easy process to do. But because of the procedures that we have with civil service and with contracts, it's a more nuanced situation. But on one hand, dealing with training, the ability to report, the feeling that you're being safe, you're in a safe environment to report. And to then mete out the discipline that's necessary, including dismissal, if it's warranted, is all the things in the continuum of issues that we're dealing with in addressing these problems that were raised by the Controller and have been in existence for a number of years.
Controller, are you familiar with the details of the Jewel Williams case?
Yes, I'm familiar with the details. I mean, from reading the paper and from the audit, yes. If he were a city employee. If I think that he has, as it stands now, a substantiated claim against him, so a substantiated claim of sexual harassment against him. So, you know, he should be fired if he were a city employee, yeah.
He should have been fired.
Yeah.
People working in your
Yeah.
office and
This is what, yes, I will say yes, but I want you to listen to the longer answer too. It's not just about one individual. Yes, yeah, I mean, because there are employees in different supervisory positions in the city that have sexually harassed employees that continue to work for the city. And that's not okay. And it's not just about one person. And that's why the change that needs to occur is so significant. And, you know, that I think that will take months of work. That's not about what was achieved, you know, and announced today. It's about working, it's about real significant change to centralize the claims and discipline as well. And I would also like to say that one thing that really came to light from the audit was that there's a cultural issue in the departments, and that people do need to be let go when they can be let go. They shouldn't be paid to work for the city if they're harassing their employees.
Some of the more common behaviors that perhaps struck you the most from that audit, can you name a few?
Inappropriate come-ons, inappropriate conversations, not just conversation, one way, making employees feel uncomfortable, especially in a supervisor-subordinate relationship. I mean, what we've seen from the phone call line and from women that have come forward and men, and that's the other thing, that there's men that called our phone line, and this is an issue of all employees, men and women. We've seen everything from inappropriate comments to groping to assault.
If you were a city employee for 4 of the years of the audit period, including 6 months as chief administrative officer, you wouldn't have the power to actually affect change in city policy. Why did you wait till you were controller and then this recommendation?
Well, actually, I was the budget director and city treasurer and chief administrative officer, which, budget director and city treasurer, those jobs have no... That why didn't I make the change? I think that, I was in that position for a year and, focused on a lot of things and am now taking the opportunity to do it. And I think that, I can turn that question around and say, in 6 months from being in office, we have the audit completed and we're going to hopefully make real change for the first time for the 25,000 employees of the city.
And let me make an additional comment on that. During the course of Rebecca's service as CAO for the years or so she was there, we did tackle lots of big problems in the city. And internally, since we've been in office, we've been having internal discussions about training on sexual harassment, on things we're moving towards this. Rebecca went into office 6 months ago and then accelerated that pace, and we're here today with progress. We're going to not stop. We're going to continue to make progress. This is obviously a situation that has existed both in government and in the private sector for generations. And obviously, it's been probably in the bad old days, it was even worse than it is now because the attention that's being brought to it with Me Too and with women standing up and not taking it anymore and demanding change. I imagine back in the city government in the 40s and 50s, it may have been a lot worse than it is now. And now people feel that they have. Hopefully, we are showing they have an opportunity now not to be afraid to step forward, not to be afraid to speak up, and that their government and that their city will support them in being protected and working in a safe environment. So it's a negative subject, but it's all positive efforts moving forward.
Where are we with the police commander who the controller talked about?
Do you know any details?
Why is he still on the force? Where are you there?
I don't have the details of where he stands in the discipline process, but we've had situations, obviously, over the years where officers have done some really egregious things, including, shooting people, and were fired and were put back by arbitrators. I could get the status of where he stands. I assume it's a he. You know? Okay, good.
The case of that specific commander is troubling on several levels, but that's a case where I'm talking about this real culture change across departments because he was promoted within the department, which was a choice of the department. So I think that's something that needs to be handled. And again, I don't know the exact timing between Ramsey and Ross.
Yeah, I'm not sure of the promotion date either, so we'd have to find out and get back to you. It could have been in the last administration.
Did you ask any member of the city council to stand with you when you signed that document today?
Councilwoman Brown could not be here today. She was the person who introduced and passed the charter change amendment that required the 3-year training. I don't know from a communication standpoint who was invited. Council members are always welcome to come at any time, and Councilwoman Brown, we had hoped would be here, but she's had something else that she had to do.
Monica City, the 30
We can improve the personnel in that unit, the number of people. We want to make sure that all of the supervisors know their responsibilities within each department, what they're supposed to do to try to streamline this process more, but certainly more personnel is a valid discussion in budget talks for next year's budget.
Controller, who audits the city council on these issues? And should they be audited?
This is the city council is actually part of this audit. And back to your earlier question about dismissals, there's actually a chart on page 27 of the audit that shows the 1, 2, 3, 4 dismissals out of 63 substantiated cases.
City council was in on that.
Yes.
What did that?
Yes, we did.
Any city council member accused of harassment?
Not, no records of that, no.
No.
Member, elected leader, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, no. No rec.
Top managers, top officials?
No, I mean, what we found, not to my knowledge, no. I mean, we can get back to you, but there's there's no elected leader except the sheriff that was in this, that came to light through the audit. And in fact, what we saw was very little documentation. I mean, only 19 of 50 departments said that they had any sexual misconduct claims over a 5.5-year period. And that's hard, the documentation is lacking. So just because there was only a few complaints in a certain department, I think City Council had 2 documented complaints in 5.5 years. I don't think that the number of official complaints that were received in our audit shows the full story. And as you see, the phone line, actually the majority of callers to our phone line who gave detailed reports about how they did submit, they filed claims of sexual harassment, they weren't in the files given to us. So that just shows the need for a significant improvement.
Are people who call the phone line, are their complaints now being taken seriously and investigated?
So the phone line was for the audit purpose. What we did as part of the audit is told them that they needed to call the central EEO unit. So we gave each of them directions. We couldn't do that for them, but we gave them direction and resources as well to try to handle it, because it's not easy to handle it.
You mentioned that there was an assault among the complaints, and that would be like a criminal matter, right? Is there some referral process for legal action above and beyond?
Yes, the policy details what needs to happen should it rise to the level of criminal behavior. So we would involve the police. I can't speak to the merits of the case.
Was there a criminal referral of the assault case?
I can't speak to that right at this moment. I mean, there should be, but I can't speak to if there was.
I still stand by what I said, and there will shortly be an election coming up in May of 19, and the public will have the opportunity to weigh in on that and do what they think is right. But these are, it's a strange nuance because they're independently elected officials. We're hoping that this effort that we're doing will become a template for those offices and their procedures, so that their employees will have a clear vehicle, a clear path to reporting these actions, and they can take the appropriate action then. At this point, though, now we cannot force that on any of the independent elected officials in the city. But again, there will be a major job interview and decision come May of 2019 on what happens with the sheriff.
Thank you. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.